Board meeting for May 7th, 2024. Please rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you again for your patience. Mr. Allen, would you please review the agenda for today?
So we have the consideration of the agenda right now, public comment, my report on the election in general, the certification of the results by the board. We'll also go through the write-in accumulations that we have received, as well as one write-in accumulation that we did not receive, but the significance of the number of it are such that we want to make note of it. Because the candidate had one variation where received over 1,000 votes to run for state senate. So don't know what he received in, well, I'll get to that later. I don't know what he may have received in Montgomery County in that portion of the district, but we do want to make note of that. Then the solicitor's report. Updates on any, if any, on plans for polling places, redistricting or consolidation, and the next meeting date tentatively for later in May.
Okay. And then I understand the voter registration commission agenda. We have one, but that meeting is not needed.
That is correct.
Okay, so we're going to not hold that meeting. Thank you. All right, well, we begin with public comment. I assume we have some this morning. Good morning, Ms. Coker. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Harris Coker, Concord Township. I have 8 points. We'll see how far I get through them. Number 1, can someone who is not a sworn member of the return board assist in the computation and canvassing of that board? This election, Mr. Allen introduced teams of 3 for the 2% recount. That was an improvement. However, in order to make up a team of 3, one of the teams of 3, he pulled in a warehouse employee who hopefully was sworn in for his regular duties, but was not a sworn member of that board. I objected. Jackie Allen called Mr. Allen, and he came and discussed the matter with me and chose to proceed. I was not asking that the entire matters be brought to a halt. I was not asking that the work of the entire board to that point be discontinued, but I did feel that legally that the proceedings of that team and their recount should be done entirely with members who had been sworn with the very distinct, detailed oath that those persons take. That was not done. They proceeded. Number 2.
That matter was brought to my attention. I gave legal guidance to continue. I think it's entirely appropriate. Election board staff assist with all manner of election-related matters. And so I didn't see an issue with it. And if you see it differently, then we'll have to adjudicate that in a court.
Can the 2% recount directed by the Secretary of State down at the wharf be conducted by persons other than the return board? Number 3, Pennsylvania state law, section 404A and F states that the clerks who made and computed and canvassed the return entries, they're the ones who are to sign, announce, and attest the same. Now, this also is required to be done by the clerks who made and computed and the report of these returns. It's further noted that the Delaware County Administrative Code, Section 6-68, requires that the this Board of Elections advertise the return board report. Not just the report to certify or not certify, but this board is required under the Delaware County Administrative Code to advertise the report of that return board. Furthermore, is there an evidentiary chain of custody for both the paper ballots and the V drives? Also, I would recommend that the persons who serve on the return board be given a copy of the law that pertains to their duties, their rights, their responsibilities, their obligations. Why are the distances still being imposed that were installed with COVID for the return board proceedings and down at the wharf? It's totally unreasonable. There is absolutely impossible to meaningfully observe. And the mail-in ballots, why do we have 24% of all the boxes in the entire state? Thank you.
Good morning, Board of Elections. Joyce Schwartz from Drexel Hill. I am very, very frustrated with this county and with this Board of Elections, I'm sorry to say, but that's the way I feel. After 2.5 years of coming here and expressing issues with the way we conduct our elections, and 4 years after the 2020 debacle, what we have now is basically a rewind to 2020. We have Groundhog Day and even before. 24%, as Kara stated, of these, we have 24% of the state's drop boxes right here in Delaware County. We have no return board report. We have no investigation that I know of into claims of unauthorized software on our voting machines. We have also no inclusion of the mail-in ballots in the statutory 2% recount, which is unacceptable. And then most recently, we have the imposition of draconian rules against observers, where we cannot bring a pocketbook, binoculars into any place where our elections are being tabulated or, any, what do you call it, adjudicated whatsoever. So I want to read another statement. Election observers are an important part of election transparency as trust. As elections are now virtually 100% digital and all election data flows through proprietary digital paths on its way to canvass and certification, the public must be allowed to observe these digital data paths as well as observing the handling of the paper ballots. Monitoring the tabulation of paper ballots at polling places and central count facilities is only a small part of election observation. We have the right to observe data transmission of all electronic vote tabulation totals through proprietary equipment, through digital connections to election software, through media feeds, and through any systems that monitor or report data collected by NGOs, federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security. We have the right to see that. That would include Albert sensors, CIS, CISA, CrowdStrike, with which this county does business. Now, Mr. Allen, Director Allen works for this county, and you folks all work for us. Instead of empowering Mr. Allen to prevent observers from having binoculars to observe, empower him to give the elections back to the people, to close the wharf, send those mail-in ballots back to the precincts where the judges of elections can count them. Mr. Allen is highly capable of organizing such a project, and you would have a flood of bipartisan volunteers to help. Thank you very much.
I'll just note that the election code requires that they be counted by the county now. So if we were to do what you just suggested, we would be violating the election code, and we're not going to do that. Thank you.
My name's Laura Lewis. I live in Radnor Township. I would like to draw attention to the case of Jerusalem versus Louisiana Department of State, which filed its writ of certiorari to SCOTUS March 8th, 2024. The case originated in the U.S. District Court of Louisiana, challenged the state's use of electronic voting machines in elections, and was dismissed for lack of standing due to generalized grievances. Jerusalem appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, where the appellate court affirmed the district court's ruling, stating a, quote, plaintiff seeking relief in federal court must demonstrate that he has a personal stake in the outcome distinct from a generally available grievance about government. Over the years, courts have expanded protections for government officials through the employment of the generalized grievance doctrine and sovereign or governmental immunity doctrine. These two doctrines have evolved to provide government officials near total protection against personal liability for unlawful and abusive actions they take when carrying out their duties. The result has been significant abuses of power being perpetuated against the people with impunity and next to no accountability. This jurisprudence has led to extreme violations of rights going unpunished. Since the only way to enforce the Constitution is through the courts, these doctrines make the Constitution an empty promise by firmly shutting the courthouse doors, because these doctrines not only shield the official from liability, but from the initiation of suit as well. Thus, we have this case at SCOTUS to eliminate general grievance doctrine to be reviewed May 9th in just 2 days' time. In the United States versus Scrap in 1973, SCOTUS has already determined, quote, to deny standing to persons who are in fact injured simply because many others are also injured would mean that the most injurious and widespread government actions could be questioned by nobody. We cannot accept that conclusion, unquote. I look forward to a favorable ruling by SCOTUS and the relitigation of dozens of cases against electronic voting machines returning to the courts to have their evidence heard. Additionally, per the Sunshine Act, it was stated that there was going to be a discussion of certification today, not the actual certification. So I hope that there will be further deliberation and certification won't be rushed through without further looking at what the results are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Before I turn to the Director of Elections for his report, I just want to say that I've been, I think, at every election board meeting since January of 2020, save for one recently and maybe one or two others. I am so proud of the work that we've done in 2020. There was no budget for mail-in ballot operations even before the COVID pandemic. There was a tremendous shifting of staff. We had leaders like Crystal Winterbottom step up into supervisory roles, but we had to staff a lot of senior positions as well as other positions. We have had these board meetings with multiple leaders, Jerry Lawrence before. We have had multiple members from the minority party, and we've worked collaboratively to create what I have said, and I joke about it, but I really think is one of the best election operations in the country. We have taken feedback constantly and consistently that is not constructive, but we've also taken back feedback that is constructive. And when we've had that constructive feedback, we've incorporated it. My favorite, again, I say it jokingly, but Rob knows what I'm going to say. My favorite example is the concerns that the V drives be on display. And we actually have a trophy case now where they're immediately put into and everybody can see them the entire time during the election results count. So there's not constructive feedback that we won't listen to and consider. And I'm just so proud of the work that we've done. And by all accounts, Jim has told me, that Republican leaders have commented positively about our continuous improvement. Democrat leaders have commented about our continuous improvement. And more important to me is both Republican and Democrat and independent and other citizens who have commented, at least to me, and I hope everybody, I hope Mr. McBlain has had the same experience about how hard this group works to make our elections fair and accurate and consistent with the law so that everybody can exercise their important duty to vote. So I'm not going to sit here and take well any comment that we have gone backwards. I see us as going forwards in such a tremendously positive way for our county and for our country, because I do think this county is so important to this country, and it will be, I'm sure, in national news again come November. So thank you all for the tremendous work that you do. And thank you, Mr. Allen, and your whole team and all the good citizens who stepped up to be poll workers for running what I think was a very smooth primary election with a lot of new equipment in preparation for what I hope to be also smooth. I expect there to be a lot of noise, but I hope to nonetheless have a very smooth November general election. I don't know if you want to make any preliminary comments. You don't feel, you didn't feel compelled to. I just felt compelled to at that moment. So Mr. Allen, then please go forward with your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I give the report, I'd like to invite a couple of individuals who served on the return board this past couple of weeks. Jennifer Booker and Mary Jo Headley, who both were the leaders of the return board effort at the voting machine warehouse. And I'd like to invite you to come forward to the podium.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First off, Mary Jo and Jennifer, I want to thank you for your years of service to this effort and leading the return board. And I would like to go through some of the materials that your teams review and the findings you make. For each precinct, there's a white binder with the numbered list of voters that provides the poll workers the ability to record each voter as they come in, and whether they're checked in on the electronic poll book or the numbered list, or rather or a paper poll book if that were necessary. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you see the white binder with the numbered list for each precinct?
Yes, we did.
And the cover of the binders contains the registered number of voters in that precinct.
Yes, it does.
So then inside, there's a page for as many as, and each page allows for as many as 100 voters to be logged by the clerk or the machine operator or the minority or majority inspector.
That
Familiar
is
with-
correct.
And in other words, if a precinct has 400 voters or slightly under 400, there are going to be 4 pages, right?
That is correct.
And if
yes.
there are 800 voters, there are going to be 8 pages.
That
right?
is correct.
1,200, 12, so
Yeah.
forth. And so you're familiar with that system and managed you two led the team that reviewed all of this, right?
That is correct, yes.
So in any of the binders with the numbered lists, were there any instances where all of the pages were signed?
Not that I'm aware of now.
Because we had 23% turnout. It was, most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, had one, maybe a second page filled out.
That's pretty much it, yes.
So in all instances, the precincts had excess and unused ballots as well, correct?
That is correct.
Even though we only are required by statute to provide at this primary 50% coverage minus however many applied to vote by mail.
Yes.
But there were still excess ballots in every single precinct
Yes, sir.
returned by the poll workers.
Yes, there was.
Also, you saw in all instances, the precincts with the turnout of about 23%, we knew starting out that in all precincts, there were fewer ballots cast than registered voters.
That is correct.
And that's one of the key things that the return board is supposed to be on guard for. And in all precincts, there were not more votes cast for any candidate than there were registered voters as well.
There was not.
So next, the job of the return board is to review the return sheets prepared by the judge of election, the minority inspector, and whoever else might be involved in looking at the tapes and the other records, correct? And are you familiar with this form, the appearance of it?
Yes.
So this is the one from Alden East, the first precinct alphabetically. And it opens up with how many ballots were received in the cage, correct? So they added up, it appears to be 450 of one party and 250 of the other for a total of 700, right?
Yes.
And then the next blank, you look at how many ballots were printed in the precinct on the touch writer, correct? And then you also look at the touch writer tape to find out if any of those were provisional ballots, right?
Yes.
So in other words, we're going through that exercise in each precinct to get the total number of ballots supplied and or printed in the precinct minus how many were used for provisional ballots, right?
Yes.
So that takes us to this number. Next, we look at the ballot counter from the scanner tape and we see how many ballots were scanned in on election day, correct?
Yes.
And then we look at spoiled ballots. And we make a note of that because even though they were used, they won't appear on the scanner tape, correct? And that wasn't always the case, right? With having access to the spoiled ballots. It was something
Yeah.
we worked to refine for you, right? So then they add those together. Then we subtract that total from the number of ballots that were supplied, right? And we get how many ballots there should be returned by the poll workers in the cage, correct?
Yes.
So that gives us a number that we then can physically verify. We often pulled out the cardboard boxes with the ballots, the Democratic ballots and the Republican ballots for this primary. And we checked that against, and those mostly came out at zero exactly, right? The difference.
Yes. Mhm.
So it was dead on, right?
Yes.
So what kind of comments have you heard from other members of the return board as far as how our poll workers are doing relative to all the documentation and everything like that? I just an open question.
This year, they've done much better. The paperwork was much more complete and very accurate.
Has that been a steady improvement or
Yes.
Jennifer?
Absolutely. It's been a very good improvement.
All right.
I've been doing this for 16 years and I see over the years, steady improvement, tweaks, and this is like the best election that I've seen so far. This election was extremely accurate. Very, very few instances of us not being able to reconcile the records.
That's great. And thank you so much for your service, both of you.
And I just want to open it up to any other comments, feedback you might have to the board as far as the work of the return board.
You want to go ahead?
Well, we have a group of people that many of us have been working together for several years. Republicans and Democrats, we work very, very well together. We trust each other and it's very important for us to follow the law and allow the people to express themselves through their votes and to do exactly what we're supposed to do. We find a lot of pride in it. So thank you.
Okay. Lastly, we refined the 2% retabulation so that we have 3 sets of eyes on that. And at the one table, we had Marvin assisting. Did either the Republican or the Democratic return board member have any concerns about that?
None that I'm aware of, no.
So when that issue was raised, I did go over and ask the return board members, A, did we have a bipartisan team there? And they said yes. B, was Marvin in any way influencing or affecting or trying to overrule any of their decisions? They said no. And lastly, were all of the decisions at that table unanimous? And they said yes. So we did investigate that, and it did help to have 3 sets of eyes at different tables. And the counting method worked. I'll leave it to you to express what the return board members said as far as our new counting method.
They felt that it was much easier to do it that way. And they thought it was, a good way to go.
Lastly, we also, for the first time in the past, we've relied on you to randomly select precincts
Yeah.
based on your voluminous memory. For anybody who doesn't know, Mary Jo worked in voter registration for many years, so she knows pretty much the boundaries of all 428 precincts, I suspect, right? But this time we introduced a new level of randomness. What did we do to select those precincts?
We used 10-sided dice and went through and pulled the districts.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Just, so and Jennifer has 16 years, Mary Jo, we don't need to put a number unless you want to on your number of years of service. But, and that is incredible. And again, thank you. But just for the purposes of today, we need to make a decision whether to certify this election. So first, I think you've already indicated, but just to be clear, did you, either of you, and I would appreciate both of you answering, see any indication of fraud or other concern that would cause into question the numbers that we're going to certify today?
Absolutely not.
No, I did not see anything.
And would you, based on your role as the return board, recommend, you don't have the role over the whole election, but that limited role, would you recommend that we certify this election?
I do.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, do you have any questions?
The question I have is in the random selection of precincts to be recounted or looked at again, are the mail-in ballots from those precincts included?
That's a great question. The state law does not provide for that. However, we did have some of the mail-in ballots from 2 precincts that were covered by the risk limiting audit. I would definitely support the random selection of 1 precinct or 2 precincts from the mail-in ballots, given the proportion of in-person ballots are still way higher than mail ballots. We had approximately 30,000 returned mail-in ballots this time, and about 63,000 of our ballots were cast in precinct, either the regular ballots or a small handful, 400 were provisional ballots. But I would definitely support having mail-in ballots included in that. We could easily work out those logistics. But I would also note that we have had roughly 8 or a dozen recounts, all of which have involved the mail-in ballots and all of which have verified the results of the mail, the absentee, and the provisional ballots.
Yeah, I mean, I did said it. I would support including the mail-in ballots and those random selections to do that. I mean, it constitutes about 1/3 of all the ballots cast. You know, it's important to take a look at it, you know, whether justified or not, especially, you know, with questions regarding mail-in ballots just in general. I mean, so to include those in what we randomly select.
Mr. Allen, would you, for the general, come up with a recommendation? You said that there's some logistics, obviously, to that.
We can. You know, that's something we definitely can do in the general election. The key is getting the reports, and with the precinct, you're feeding ballots into the scanner all day long, and it's capturing votes, but it's not tabulating. And then at the end of the day, when they close polls, it tabulates all of those votes that it's gathered through the day. At the central count, you are running a batch, say, from Bethel 1, right? And you run that through the scanners, and that's everything that arrived up until the Monday before Election Day. And that has been, you know, checked. The envelopes were signed, they were dated within the standards set by law. It was an envelope that was requested. You know, all those different questions have been answered prior to Election Day. And then you have separate smaller batches, very small relatively, that are processed sometimes in combination with other precincts. You know, when you get the last batches that arrive in the mail on Election Day and the last that arrive before the drop boxes are closed at 8 p.m. on Election Day. So you have a tape that makes it pretty easy to check the results for Smith versus Jones and Peterson versus Michelson, what have you, on down the ballot for the precinct. You don't have that for mail-in ballots. So, but we can look to generate something from the HART system. I suspect that can replicate that. So yeah, I feel confident we can do that
together. I mean, I know the batch that gets run beginning at 7 a.m. on Election Day, and this time was completed before the polls closed. So it was great. And then the last of the drop boxes and the last of the mail, do they get stored together? I mean, is that something where if we were to rerun them as part of a test that they have to be pulled from separate places? Or
for the risk limiting audit, to prepare for preparation in all the risk limiting audits, we tend to separate those entirely by township. So we should be able to, or borough or Chester City. So we should be able to gather those and then perform the test accordingly. So, but as you mentioned, there are some small combinations at the end. So we're going to have to take exceptional care to make sure that if we ran a mixed batch of, let's say, ballots that were transcribed because they were damaged in the mail or damaged in the opening process, and there might be one from Bethel 1 and one from Alden East and another one from, Upper Darby. Want to make sure that we want to make sure we get it right.
Right. We want to make sure they all get back together in the right place.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, we look forward to that recommendation. Mr. Alberts, do you have any comment?
He's muted.
I know if he doesn't go off mute, then does
He's
that mean no?
muted.
Yeah, I have no further comments at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, Mr. Allen, or
Real briefly, I mean, I just can't say enough about the team that we have. Rob Wright, Lorraine
wait,
Hagan.
oh, wait, I want to make sure they can go back.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to object to the certification since there are no.
So-
30% talk about.
This is out of order. Please continue.
So I can't say enough about the team, Rob Wright, Lorraine Hagan, Crystal Winterbottom, Pam Lairdson, all the people at the warehouse, all the people at voter registration, all the people here at the Bureau in media and the Bureau offices in Chester. This was by all measures, a successful election. We're hearing it from our poll workers. We're hearing it from our voters. We're getting counts reported sooner than ever before. They're more complete than ever before. All of this bodes well for the fall. So with that, I would like to ask the board to entertain a motion to certify the results of this April 23rd, 2024 primary election.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion. So, yeah. So moved.
All right. Do we need any further discussion? Mr. Allen, did you have any further to present on that?
Yes, briefly, we did have petitions to accumulate write-in votes. So I would like to recommend that we accept, in the case of 2 legislative candidates, we will certify these numbers to the state. And in all the other cases where these are political offices, by political offices, I mean committeemen, committeewoman, and then in one case, delegate for the Democratic National Convention. We will affirm these numbers, but it will be up to the political parties based on their rules on as far as whether they will accept any and all of these as winners. In most cases, I think they will. But there may be one case that they don't. So Jeffrey O. Jones, Republican, candidate for representative in the General Assembly in the 163rd District, which is a 2-year term, received 1,098 votes, which is far in excess of what is required to be a candidate for State House. Secondly, Greg Harris received 1,118 votes, write-in votes, as a Republican candidate for state senator in the 17th district. I would note that we did not receive a petition to accumulate, but those 1,118 are all that one permutation of Greg Harris. So he did not need to submit any paperwork. Next, Stephen Zane, Republican candidate for committeeman in Collingdale 7, received 12 votes. Lisa A. Daniel, committeewoman, Darby Township 5-1, received 68 votes. Michael, I apologize to this person if I'm mispronouncing it, Pino, committeeman in Darby Township 5-2, received 18 votes. Dennis P. Dunn Jr., committeeman in Springfield 4-1, 66 votes. Michaela E. Leventry, committeewoman in Lower Chi, 24 votes. Lower Chi 2, I should say. Patricia Ann Holtzinger, committeewoman in Ridley Park 1, 12 votes. Robert J. May Jr., committeeman, Chester Township 2, 11 votes. Linda Marie Mitchell, committeewoman in Haverford 3-3, 20 votes. And Christina M. Talbot, Republican committeewoman in Glen Olden 3, 15 votes. And lastly, Anna Marie Hessman, Democratic candidate for Democratic National Convention delegate, received 43 write-in votes.
I would note that I think on these, if I recall correctly, on these committee positions, the minimum number of votes to get on the ballot is 10. So the totals that Mr. Allen just reviewed are all in excess of the minimum required. And for a primary, that's a requirement to recognize a winner. You can't, if you need 10 votes to get on the ballot, you only get 8, it's write-in, that's not enough.
But these won't be on the ballot in the fall. First of all, do you have a copy of the
That's true.
proposed certification?
Yes,
Mr. Rock, can you just present, like, describe what
The
you're
write-in,
writing up?
I'm sorry.
Oh, the write-ins you'd like to see?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but I do want to get on the record the certification itself. Okay. And mechanically, so mechanically, can you walk us through what we're doing today, just so it's very clear? I don't want to just say we're going to certify without having the longer presentation.
this is the results of the Democratic and Republican primary elections for offices ranging from nominees for President of the United States on down to committeemen and committeewomen for the Republican Party, delegates for both parties' national conventions, and in between also candidates for U.S. Senator, where applicable, member of Congress, Attorney General, state office, Auditor General, a state office, State Treasurer, a state office, state senator where applicable. We only had 2 districts where there were state senate openings or state senate contests on the ballot, I should say. Representative in the House, as well as, and that was in all districts. The voters were presented with that item. And that covers everything.
Okay. And those numbers, I can see the reports. Those are also available to the public?
These have been posted to the board's website. All of our vote processing was completed nearly a week ago, Wednesday. So these results have been on our board's website since then, including the write-in report, which was made available Tuesday afternoon. Originally, last meeting, I thought it might take until Wednesday, but the staff did a great job of going through all those items and getting those logged so that those were available to the write-in candidates to accumulate last Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, and then mechanically, you would ask the question, just the process for how these are then potentially added or not added and where they land in terms of when they're accumulated and we certify.
Well, the 2 state offices, those were going to be reporting to the state, but then the candidates must take affirmative actions on top of that, such as filing a statement of candidacy and or a statement of economic interest and other paperwork that might be necessary to run for state office. So being a write-in candidate and getting the write-in votes is not the end of the line for that. There are still other processes that those 2 candidates will have to follow up with in Harrisburg. The candidates who were write-ins, successful write-ins for committeemen and committeewomen will certainly get them information that their results were certified here today. We reviewed their registrations, that they are registered at the addresses stated in their petition to accumulate, that they are registered with the correct political party. We checked the number of votes in each case, corrected them where necessary if they made a mistake in their calculations. So those individuals will need to contact their, in this case, most of them, the Republican Party.
And I asked the leaders of the return board, but I want to ask you as well, as the overseer of the whole election process for Delaware County, do you have any concerns that or any indications of fraud or other activity that should cause us pause in voting to certify this election?
No. As a matter of fact, we do numerous tests that are required by law, but there's also a test that goes above and beyond what is required by the law, and that's the hash testing. And we are literally checking the software fingerprint as it was certified by the United States Election Assistance Commission, you can only get one passing score, and that's 100%. Perfect match. 99.9 doesn't cut it, 100.1. So we're displaying that now. So on the left side, as you see that, that is the hash or software fingerprint that was certified for the HART equipment by the Election Assistance Commission. And that hash is provided to us by the Election Assistance Commission. On the right side is the hash that we pulled from the voting equipment here in Delaware County. And in every instance, we randomly selected equipment. Again, this is not a test that's required by law. This is something we do for the sake of good order. And in every instance that we have done this, the hash has come back as a perfect match. In fact, you can see on this display the words. I don't know if you can enlarge that.
Selected files right then.
The selected files are identical, meaning it has exactly the same software components. If anyone were to change any item of the program, it would change the hash on our end. So this is directly from the federal government. We test against that. That is the gold standard. I strongly encourage other agencies to do this as well. But I believe that we're one of the only jurisdictions in all of Pennsylvania that goes this extra step, and we do it every single election. We do it prior to each election, and then we do it after we're done counting everything to double check those same randomly selected precincts in a very open and transparent process, which observers are able to attend. So I stand by that this is 100% paper system, not a digital system. When it comes down to it, what's on that paper and what we've been through with recounts, that's what counts. And that's what was reviewed by the return board. We had 2 new members of the return board who commented that they had worked in the polls before in the precinct level and who came away from that experience, both new ones, one Republican, one Democrat, who said, wow, I knew this system was accurate. I did not realize how accurate it is because it captures even the slightest little check marks or X's. Some of our voters are, they treat it like a coloring book test. They make these perfect rectangular marks inside there. They fill in every little pixel of space. Other ones are more casual, make an X, and it captures it every single time. So I feel 100% confident, having gone through recounts on this equipment, having seen its performance this time, seeing the results of the 2% that we turned into the state. Absolutely.
You would recommend we certify?
Mhm.
I'm very impressed with your eyesight too, by the way. I could not read that at all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. McLean.
I just had a couple questions. Number one, did we receive any petitions to accumulate irregular votes or write-in votes? For any offices?
The 2 offices I referenced, which were
other-
state representative,
Well, we didn't
receive one for state senator.
The form or the name that is on the sheet received sufficient enough votes that they didn't have to accumulate.
Correct.
Okay, but I'm saying, like, for instance, Alden East committeeman. Did anybody file petitions to accumulate for any other offices? Did we receive any petitions to accumulate?
Yes, all of these items that I read, except for one, the Greg Harris, all of these were petitions to accumulate.
And there were no others? Were there petitions to accumulate that didn't reach the mandatory number?
No.
Okay, so
Starting at the
petitions
top,
to accumulate for the ones that you read off and the ones that are on the sheet that the chair and I are looking at.
correct.
Okay. The second question I had is, all of the write-in votes,
for all the local offices, the political offices, they are included in what we are certifying, correct?
Yes, they are.
I mean, right, and they'll have, even though,
Is there an example you want to look at?
yeah, I mean, no, I mean, just because they, like, for instance, it wasn't on the sheet. I just want to make sure we're certifying the ones, you know, because as we said, that even though it takes 10 names on a petition to be nominated in the election itself, you only really need one vote to win. So I want to make sure for those precincts where, and I know at least on the Republican side for committee people, they were the only committee people running this year, that there were a number of write-ins that there may only be one or two or five, you know, but not 10, that we're certifying those also.
I'm relying on a court case out of Allegheny that referenced a minimum number of write-ins. So that referenced 10.
That were necessary to win election? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
I do understand. And what the issue is, because in these party races, and particularly the committee person races, it's not a primary.
Right.
It's during the primary. It's contemporaneous with the primary election, but it's a final election.
Right. So if John McLean got 2 votes, I hope I didn't, but if John McLean got 2 votes as the Republican committeeman in Alden West, that's included in our results.
It's included in our results. And that's, so anyone could take that information and claim, you know, the office with the Republican Party.
Okay.
And just to emphasize this point, think about it this way: when we are reporting the portion of the election that involves political offices, is effectively a courtesy to the political parties. They run their own political systems and they make their own determinations. And an example would be, there are a bunch of write-in votes for Democratic National Committee nominee, but they have their own rules within the Democratic National Committee. And because of the way those rules work, somebody who wins a write-in contest in Delaware County does not necessarily become that nominee, because there are equal representation requirements in the Democratic National Committee rules. So if it would not balance the gender of the people attending the committee, then the person who has the highest votes wouldn't necessarily be the nominee. So they're subject to party rules. Ultimately, you will be certifying the votes as cast, yes, with the results that include all of the write-in results. And it will be up to the parties to decipher what that would mean within the mechanics of their own party operation. Again, that piece of our election was essentially a courtesy to the parties. We do the administration for their election.
But they probably want it certified.
They probably do.
I think a shorter and more succinct answer to your question is that we certify the results. For example, there was a contest in a state, we only had one state representative contest where there were 2 candidates on the ballot, and it escapes me, down in Chester.
Mm-hmm.
We don't certify the winner. You know, we just certify the results.
Correct.
So we're not saying the incumbent state representative won, or in the case of a committeeman or committeewoman at the precinct level, that, you know, we're not saying which one won. We're just, these are the numbers.
Right.
And then it's up to the individuals in those instances.
But if John McLean got 1 vote for write-in for Alden committee person,
Right.
would that be in our certified results?
It would be in the write-in results, a portion of the certified.
You would not be certifying that person as the winner. You would be certifying that they got 1 vote. And here's why we don't certify them as the winner. It's 25 PS 3155. it states, in the primary, the county board shall not certify the votes cast on irregular ballots, meaning write-in ballots, for any person for a justice of the peace, constable, national, state, county, city, borough, town, township, ward, school district, election, or local party office, unless the total number of votes cast for said person is equal to or greater than the number of signatures required on a nomination petition for the particular office. So again, the data will be there. The parties can make their determination according to their rules, but because of that provision, there's a minimum number of votes required before you can say this person won the race.
Okay,
And it includes a party office.
okay, thank you. And just finally, I've had the chance to look at the unofficial results that we've had posted for the last week, as well as the write-in. Has that changed at all since yesterday?
No, it has not.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Mr. Alberts, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think you guys summed up that question quite well. Ready to vote if you are.
All right. Then all those in favor of the motion to certify this primary election, say aye.
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 None opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Any other motions or any other activity from you, Mr. Allen, or should we turn to the solicitor report?
No, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Park.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We just briefly have one item with the certification now complete. The board is aware that there have arrangements have been made and papers have been prepared for a redistricting petition with respect to Radnor. That is ready to be filed, and we have received direction from Mr. Allen to proceed with the filing of that. So we will likely be filing that as soon as tomorrow.
And this is the same plan that we've discussed publicly here before.
Correct. This is the redistricting plan that Radnor Township does every 10 years. So the last time they did it, I believe, was 2013. And then they approved a new redistricting plan in 2023. So we're now incorporating that. We're modifying it just one bit because they had one precinct that would have had fewer than 30 voters in it. That's not allowed under the election code. And that's the only modification where we're adhering that to the neighboring precinct that was proposed by Radnor. That's the only change to their plan that we're making.
And for that one precinct, it was due to an anomaly, as I understand it, in census results. And I think we've discussed that at prior meetings. So we had to address.
Traffic examples of that.
Yeah, we had to address the reality of the, numbers on the ground versus what the census results came up with. And I think that was a function of where people were attributed because they were students at a school.
All right.
I want to add that Mr. Allen took the time to meet with some stakeholders who had some very real concerns about the timing and the manner by which we were doing this. They were quite anxious and worked up about it, and for some legitimate concerns. And he took the time to meet with them and resolve them reportedly to their satisfaction. But Mr. Allen reported that, as did the individuals who spoke to me. So I want to commend him for his efforts in making sure that all the stakeholders were fully informed and understood our process. So.
Well, thank you. There's a lot of work to go on that because we need to make sure that all the voters are informed, especially ahead of this important primary or presidential election, rather, of any changes. The minority of voters in Radnor Township will be changed. However, we need to make sure that everyone is enfranchised and knows about the changes. And I'm grateful that the township has agreed to work with us as far as outreach efforts to voters through signage along trails, what have you, and mailings and newsletters and contacting voters at the township level. So I'm grateful for their cooperation in this effort.
Agreed. That's really important. And that was their primary concern, was making sure the voters know, obviously, before the general.
Yes, it is. Was.
Thank you,
Remake.
Mr. Allen. Then any
Before
other?
we move on, I do have one other matter to report on of general public interest. I think the board's probably up to speed on this, but it probably deserves some discussion at a public meeting. And that is, As the board and Mr. Allen and many of the members of the public who follow the news somewhat closely are likely aware, a legal action was filed some time ago in which effectively a federal challenge was brought to the state law practice as interpreted by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in a relatively recent decision that ballots with defective or missing dates, mail ballots with defective or missing dates on their outer envelopes should not be counted. The gist of that action was that throwing ballots out or refusing to count ballots with that sort of a defect violated the Civil Rights Act, and which prohibits throwing out or disenfranchising voters for basically minor paperwork defects, to summarize the language of the statute. The district court, meaning the trial court in that case, ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, finding a violation of the Civil Rights Act. A 3-judge panel on appeal before the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit ruled on a 2-to-1 basis to overturn the district court and conclude that there was no Civil Rights Act violation. The petitioners in that case then filed for a petition for rehearing, including a review en banc, which would mean by the entire Third Circuit Court, as opposed to just a 3-judge panel like decided the initial appeal. Since our last meeting, the Third Circuit has denied the petition for rehearing and petition for rehearing en banc, meaning that as far as this is concerned, that case is concerned at the Court of Appeals level, it is decided. The only other option for the petitioners there would be to petition for writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court for review. I don't have any insights as to whether the petitioners would seek such a review by the United States Supreme Court, but unless and until something like that were to happen, the court were to grant such a petition and then reverse the Court of Appeals, the law in Pennsylvania and the law that this board will have to follow is that mail ballots with missing dates or with fundamentally defective dates, dates that are somebody's birthday, for example, not a date they could have filled in their mail ballot, will be disqualified. And we have been working under those rules for, the most recent election, because that's what the Court of Appeals decision had been just prior to this election. So that's not a change. That's also the rules we were following in the 2023 general election. And we have very specific parameters for what dates would qualify and what dates are deemed defective. And those align with the guidance from the Department of State, although it should be noted, we developed our parameters before the Department of State issued any guidance. And as it happened, when the Department of State did issue guidance, it aligned exactly with our parameters. That suggests to me they may have actually relied on Delaware County's parameters in developing their guidance, which, if that's true, I think it's a credit to Jim and his team that they developed parameters that the Department of State thought were appropriate for the entire Commonwealth.
I'm sticking by my best announcement that we're doing the best job here. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Mr. Allen did tell me that, and that was my first reaction was, why wouldn't they take a well-drafted, well-thought-through process and incorporate it?
Thank you. So I just want to make sure the public understands we don't throw out anything.
Yes.
For clarification,
For language,
we
not counted.
We do not open envelopes that are clearly incorrectly or undated, incorrectly dated or undated entirely. And I just want to emphasize that we have been following these same standards consistently each election since the November 2022 election, when the Pennsylvania Supreme Court came down with this ruling. The initial circuit court ruling saying that the dates were not relevant came down after we certified the November 2023 election. So the only items that they affected were the recounts, and that it didn't change the outcome of the recounts. It added or subtracted one vote from the lead depending on who was up or down, but it had no meaningful impact. And then the Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruling came down before this election. So really, there's been no change. We've been operating under the same rules now consistently since the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling in 2022.
Right. But the most important thing is teaching the public how to properly date their ballots. And I know also, Mr. Allen, you talked earlier about looking at whether or not we can improve even further the bolding and the giant X and other things to get people to sign different forms in the correct location. So I look forward to those efforts, but I know we're on constant improvement, but we want to make sure the public understands how to do those things, and the judges of elections do as well. So thank you. All right, with that, is there any other matter for discussion? All right, what's our next meeting date, Mr. Allen?
Be the fourth, if it's necessary, it will be on the fourth Tuesday of May, which
28th.
the 28th. Thank
Okay.
you.
You'll let us know and obviously announce it to the public, and we haven't started full summer break yet. So
So I
thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.